Welcome back to Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. I'm personal financial planner, columnist, and financial therapist Rick Kaler. Research tells us that 90% of all financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. For nearly 4 decades, I've been helping people make better money decisions. So what makes my financial worldview different from most financial experts? I blend the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Good money decisions are not just about the money. So let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back to another edition, and I'm delighted to have Khara Croswaite Brindle with us today. When did we first meet, Khara? Was it on it was probably at FTA somewhere on the
That's right.
The supervision committee, maybe.
No, actually,
it was
the first time
before
I
that.
I saw you in the Denver conference because that was my first FTA conference back in 2022. I think that was it. So I was still nursing my baby and all the things. So I popped in and popped out and met you at the table. You said hi to me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Rick is saying hi to me. I know you." I don't know you. So I think 2022.
You'd heard he doesn't say hi to too many people.
No, that was the story I told myself, is that people who are so established in this field don't talk to new people. You obviously don't show up that way. You show up as very calm and compassionate and approachable. So I appreciated that as a green financial therapist back in the day.
Well, you bring a lot of credentials to the financial therapy space. Just tell us a little bit about your path to becoming a financial therapist and a consultant to financial therapists.
Well, I never do anything half done. So all of my stuff is kind of quick in this timeline. But I've been a mental health therapist for now 15 years here in Colorado, which is where I'm calling in from, and found financial therapy in 2020, which the pandemic was happening. I felt like I was burning out for the second time in my mental health career. Saw all the signs and symptoms, didn't want that to happen again, because the first time it ended me up with a health crisis. So didn't want to sign up for that again. And as part of isolation, feeling disconnected from my community, I was interviewing folks for a little business class that I was putting together. And I heard the term financial therapy. And I was like, what is this? And then I found Wendy, who's one of the financial therapists here in Colorado, interviewed her. And within 24 hours, I knew I wanted to work under her and learn what financial therapy was. So I worked with her for 6 months, did my own work, ugly cried for 6 months, pretty much, with my own money healing. And then launched my private practice. And so here I am. I've niched down to working with other therapists because so many of us have money anxiety, avoidance, and shame. And that's the stuff I worked through. And now I do that in supervision of financial therapists.
What was it? I mean, your original discipline is that of a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And many therapists are money avoidant.
Right.
What was it that called to you? Because money doesn't call to therapists very often.
Yeah, it's usually pretty painful. Well, I think my money healing journey started in 2019 when I did a mini MBA program through Goldman Sachs. And at that point, they had me in a room with 50 other entrepreneurial folks of all industries. And they told us, hey, we're going to have a day talking about your money. And I remember just the visceral reaction of bracing, muscle tension, clenching my jaw, thinking I'm not going to show up well. And I was in a tiny little cohort of 7. And I remember just out of the blue being I'm just going to tell them that I'm not going to show up well, because I was worried that they would misinterpret that I was being mean to them or snarky. And I looked at these, 7 other people, and I said, I don't think I'm going to show up well. I think I'm going to be grumpy. I don't like this. And I remember none of them were therapists. And they all looked at me and said, Khara, you're fine. You're okay. Show up as you are. Apparently that makes me so emotional as I lose my voice here. And so I felt very held, very safe.
Oh, nice.
So I started that work then in 2019. So by the time I got to Wendy, I knew that I wanted to continue the journey because I wasn't done yet. And thus the ugly crying for 6 months. It was still pretty hard work.
What brought you into an MBA program? That's not very therapist-like.
Yeah. Ironically, it was my financial advisor who's like, "Hey, I've heard of this program. I think you should check it out." At the time, I was a group practice owner, so I had a team of 6 clinicians working for me. And so I met the parameters of like certain income per year for 5 year span to be eligible. There was a whole interview and like a pitch deck and like, what do you want to help get you into this program? And that was such a turning point on so many levels in my life. I became more of a business owner because most therapists don't know business. But more importantly, I learned about vulnerability because I ended up having to pitch to 100 100 entrepreneurial folks in that experience. And I won the pitch because I was vulnerable rather than just here are my numbers. So a lot happened in 2019.
Wow. So it was um, transitioning, these are all my words, transitioning from owning a practice to owning a business. Would
Yes.
that be a way of
Yeah,
framing it up?
absolutely.
And it's amazing that mentally you made that shift. And I say that because I was in training once to group. It was a group therapy training by the American Group Psychotherapists Association. I was the only non-therapist in there, but nobody knew that. And the leader said at one point in time, if you want to be successful in this business, and I just lit up like, oh my God, he called it a business. He said, you've got to do your countertransference work, and you'll only be as successful as you do to the extent that you do your countertransference work. But what I took away was his framing this as a business, which I just don't hear in therapeutic circles a lot.
Yeah.
So it was that desire and prompting from your financial advisor to get more information on how to run a business.
Absolutely, because like I'd been doing it already for, I guess at that point, 5 years. So I got past that horrible statistic that all businesses majority fail in the first 5 years, right? That was a
Yeah.
parameter of the program. You had to at least be in the business 5 years.
Oh,
So I
wow.
understood that. They knew they wanted to like
Wow.
invest in people who got past that hump. But for some reason, I said yes, and I went through the whole process, and I learned so much about myself and so much about business. And luckily, I've been able to bring that back to other therapists because so many of us, and this is a grad school problem, go into the field with no business knowledge. Like they don't teach private practice in graduate school, although I've been starting to do that with my alum. It's not a requirement. It's not actually like something people think to say, hey, we should probably set you up to figure out how to do this on your own, because that's the typical pipeline. Like we want to go work for ourselves eventually, but they weren't filling that gap. So lots of problems on the business side for so many of us.
That is so totally true. And usually, or more recently at the AGPA, I have spoke to them for, I don't know, a decade. They'll have a breakout session, maybe a whole day on how to run your business. And I sat through one of them, and it was like all I could do to keep my hand down and my mouth shut. No, I don't think that's an S corp you're talking about. It's an LLC.
Oh man, yes.
But it is so important. Tell me more about in this MBA course, the vulnerability. That sounds like it was significant to you.
Yeah, I've done a lot of reflection on that recently because I think that's when vulnerability showed up. So you and I also could be nerding out about the Enneagram, and this vulnerability piece is huge for that. So I identify as an Enneagram 3, which our biggest growth edge is deceit or self-deceit of like everything's fine, everything's fine. So I think that image of the dog with the little house on fire cartoon where like everything around him is on fire and he's like, it's great, it's great. And so in 2019, I'd just come out of recovering from my first professional burnout. So I was burnt out from 2016 to 2018 before I realized what was going on, which is hard. That's hard to admit to people because I'm a mental health therapist. I should know, quote unquote, that I'm burning out.
You're not
But I had
allowed
all
to
these
burn out. You're supposed to have it all together, right?
Yeah. And I just said, oh, stress, chronic stress, it's fine. Gave myself a health condition, got the reality check I needed once I hit that rock bottom with my health, and then came into this program. And everyone was told you have to do a 3-minute pitch on what you want to work on in your business. So like as if you were getting funding from, let's say, an angel investor.
Okay.
And so, as you can imagine, all different industries, people were like, I need money to build a building. I need money to do marketing. I need money for all these things. But at the time, I wanted to focus on one of the arms of my business, which is suicide prevention. And so I was like, I can't really talk about what I need funding for without being a little vulnerable as to why it's so important to me, why it's been something that my entire career has kind of revolved around. And so for some reason, probably because that little 7 group cohort said, hey, we got you, I was like, I'm just going to take this a step further and be vulnerable in this pitch. So I remember my voice shaking. I remember my body was shaking. I remember that I felt like I was going to cry in front of 50 people. And their job was to listen, give feedback, and then vote for one of the 50 people to like win the pitch. So I won it. And then I did it again, like 2 hours later to 100 people. And it was just an interesting, memorable experience, as you can imagine.
Wow. I'm just going to make up a story that vulnerability and being on the edge of tears was so authentic.
Yeah.
And sold so at such a real, at a deep level.
Yeah. And that was the first time I realized I could be a leader that was vulnerable and authentic and still be a good leader. Because the story I told myself is, you can't be authentic, you can't be vulnerable, you have to be strong and purposeful and all these things that were really just protective parts of me saying, be strong. And when all those people said that was so impactful, that had me moved to tears, like that was the feedback I needed right after to say this was okay. This was okay to be vulnerable. I wasn't weak. I wasn't unprofessional. I was authentic, which is what Enneagram 3s are supposed to move towards in their most healthiest self. So it was like, ding.
Wow. And that would be big for anybody. But I think underscoring how big that is for an Enneagram 3.
Yeah.
I don't know, probably one of the scariest things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, right up there with being unproductive and not worthy, right? Like it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Wow. That is super impactful. So I don't know if I cut you off in your story, but that was the beginning of your attunement to money.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're ugly crying for six months as you work through your own stuff. Were you working through that with, was it Wendy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So as part of her expectation was, okay, if I'm going to teach you how to do this work, you have to do your own work, which I appreciate. And actually, I've very much adopted that in how I work it out with other therapists. And so she's like, okay, we're going to take 6 months to, go through your own stuff. Also experientially learning the tools, which that's great for my learning style. Like I want to learn it in a very thoughtful way, but to experience it, I know exactly what I'm asking someone else to do, right? So when she's like, hey, I want you to look at your money beliefs in this way, or let's look at this other exercise. Those are things I adopted in my own practice with others because I knew how to frame it. I knew the risks of asking people to do it. I knew what it felt like in my own body to do the exercise. And so after those 6 months, then I started taking on clients. And so it felt like a very like step A to step B. Do your own work, then you get to see clients. And that's where Wendy and I are very similar. Like we both believe that to be very important for financial therapists. Do your own work first or ongoing, right? We're not done, but do some really solid work and then start with the clients.
And Wendy, I believe I ran into Wendy.
Yeah, I'm sure you know her.
2021-ish, kind of when I started in this work. And is Wendy, are you guys still working together? Is Wendy still in practice or?
Yes, she's still in practice. She had a little pause in her own life with some stuff, but we're still in touch and we tend to run into each other as we come into different events. I don't work with her as a mentor in the same capacity anymore as I've kind of been off and running. But yeah, I credit a lot of my self-discovery to both the MBA program and her, because they both created safe spaces to do the work.
I have a question because I think your trajectory is so, I want to call it textbook.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know what text I'm referring to. But the idea of we go there first ourselves and that we can't take a client where we haven't gone. And that you took that 6-month period to do your own work. In your experience in working with financial therapists, how common is that?
I mean, I think the idea of they do something that feels profound or like a lightning bolt is like hitting. That's how it felt for me when I first met Wendy, of like, this is what I'm meant to do. I think that experience is very common. I would like to believe that all people are doing their own work, even if it means ongoing as they see clients, because I'm also hearing in my head as a professor, well, you can't always know the client's experience, and that doesn't mean you're a bad therapist fit for them, right? Of like, you don't have to have gone through poverty to have unconditional positive regard for their experience. You don't have to have a financial windfall to be able to hold space for somebody. So I think those two thoughts are waging in my head right now. They're kind of like pulling at each other of like, yes, do your own work so you have a sense of your own edges, as I call them, but know that you don't have to have the lived experience to still be a good clinician, or in this case, financial therapist to someone who's going through something.
Yeah, I think I go back, my frame around that is when I first started doing this work with Ted Klontz, and he owned Onsite at that time. And I think somewhere in our discussion, I asked him, well, how many therapists do their own work? And my frame was, I did a lot of work. I've done a lot of group work. And at Onsite, there'd be therapists in the group. My frame was that all therapists did their own work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, what I learned is all therapists that worked at Onsite did their own work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, well, what percent? And he says, I think about 1. Mm-hmm. And I said, did you say 10?
Like, a little higher, please. Yes.
He said, no. I said 1. And I'm like, I was just dumbfounded.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think everybody that listens to this knows that Sarah Swaltner and I worked closely for a number of years, and she was going through her training in psychotherapy. And she would come back with stories like, yeah, not too many in my cohort are interested in doing their own therapy because they say, we're here to help other people.
Oof. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm dumbfounded. I'm like, and of course, Sarah is the poster child for doing her own work. Mm-hmm. I'm like, how is that possible? So that's just a wondering that I've had, is I wonder to what degree that might carry over to financial therapy. And I would think it's a higher, whatever this percentage is, mm-hmm. It's probably a higher percentage that do their own work around money.
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah, out of like this optimism place. Yeah. I mean, even grad programs don't require people to do their own therapy. Some do, but not all. And so even just like making it, hey, this is what it feels like to be on the other side of the chair, or on, opposite side of the couch, or whatever the analogy is. And so I know some programs require it. But yeah, a lot of people, like, what if their clients, that's the first question they ask as part of self-disclosure, like, hey, Khara, have you ever been to therapy? Like, I can say, yes, I have. But for some of these green clinicians, that's not the case. And so I think this catapulted some of the collaboration about with Ed of like, oh, we're trying to tell financial therapists, how do you do yourself a therapist work? Because there is a risk of harm there, or broken trust of like, wait, you're asking me to do hard work, but you've never experienced it. You don't know how painful this could be. So looking at the pacing of even how we introduce exercises to people that are very emotional.
Totally. I just don't see how you can give people financial therapeutic exercises and have not done them yourself. And in fact, what I teach at GGU, facilitating financial health, they don't bill it this way, but the truth is it's all about doing your own work.
Yeah.
We go through it 16 weeks of doing your own work. Yes, and you've been so kind to talk with my students in the past. So it's critical, and it's critical for a good financial planner to reverse those roles and become a client. That's so informative. I know it was for me. Like, oh, wow, this is what my clients are experiencing. And I know in being an IFS practitioner, I will say 50% of what I use in a session comes from doing my own IFS. It's like, oh, they never taught this.
Yeah.
But I've been there. The felt sense of being there myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that is so cool. Your trajectory is just so cool.
Thank you. In my head, I hear, oh, it's so fast. And as I share more of my story with our community of financial therapists, the feedback I've gotten most is, oh, that's inspiring, or that gives me hope that I can find my place quickly. Some of these folks, it's like their second career, like the second iteration of their career. And so they're, I think, eager to contribute and make their mark and have a legacy for all the right reasons. So that was like feedback I didn't expect. I expected people to be like, how do you do this so quickly? Are you sure? Jack of all trades kind of stuff there. But for most folks, they're like, no, this is inspiring. And there's so much more we can contribute to the field. It's not that old.
When you're saying a second career, I just had the thought that probably financial therapy is a second career for a lot of financial therapists, or at least an expansion of a career, whether it's financial planning or whether it's mental health.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. I mean, obviously, I'm the poster child of that. Of like, oh, this is another pivot in my career. I don't stay with anything that's painful for too long. And financial therapy checked a lot of boxes, even though it is painful. It's like bearable painful versus like EMDR trauma work, which is what I came from.
And I'm thinking of financial planning back when I started. I don't know that I was an OG in financial planning, but I certainly was raised by the OGs. And it was all second career. There's nobody that came in as a financial planner. You came from mutual fund sales, life insurance sales, in my case, real estate. It was all second career.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
And obviously today there's undergrad in financial planning, there's masters in financial planning. You can actually come in. I mean, one of the ladies that works for us, Cecilia Fleming, she knows nothing in her adult life except financial planning. I think she got her undergrad in it, and then went right to work for a fee-only financial planning firm. And so as a 20-something, she has 10 years in the field, which is so unusual. Usually you got to be 40, right? Before that happens.
Right.
So I think, where do you see the profession going? What's the future financial therapist look like?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel like they're probably going to be someone from what we just said, might be second specialty, second career, the next iteration of their career. I don't know. I have this is my bias showing up here on your podcast, but I have my own thoughts of like people getting lived experience or like getting their like feet wet before they move into leadership roles. And so whether that's doing your own work in financial therapy or being in the trenches as a mental health therapist, I think that both are showing up for me. So I feel like this person might be somewhat seasoned in the career. Maybe they're like 5-10 years in, they're not brand new. And then they find financial therapy and they bring in all these beautiful skills they've already had. And then they start to niche down what their ideal client might be. Like, here's who I want to work with. Here's what I can contribute from that lived experience. Earlier, when you described mental health folks who haven't done their own work, there's a word for that or a phrase. It's wounded healer, which means we're not fully healed ourselves.
That's good.
I don't remember I want to give credit. That's not my language. That's somebody else's, but I can't think of who it is. But the wounded healers coming in, I think that if they have 5 to 10 years in the field, they've learned so much about themselves and the clientele that they might show up even more purposefully in financial therapy, is my guess.
Yeah, that's that depth is so important. What you're triggering in me is I used to say I love hiring somebody in their mid-30s.
Yeah.
And my words were not very eloquent. I said, well, you've been beat up and you've got some bruises,
Fair.
which would be life experience,
Yes. Uh-huh.
which are very different in coming out of college.
Yeah.
You
Different
can
challenges.
be starry-eyed. So what are you doing right now? What's a day in Khara's life look like?
Oh gosh. Well, I usually describe myself as a serial entrepreneur because every day looks slightly different. One day a week I'm on full-time. Well, one day a week I am fully at the campus as an adjunct professor for my counseling students, so master students learning how to be therapists. And I love
And what
that. That's my
campus is
alum.
that?
University of Denver.
Yeah.
So counseling psych program. So I do that one day a week and I'm all in. That's my whole focus all day long. Everything from, basic counseling techniques classes to live supervision, which has been very rewarding for my career. Like, hey, they're doing real-time therapy with clients and I'm right there in another room helping them navigate the imposter syndrome, the stuckness, the deer in headlights, where do I go from here? But also client crisis, as you can imagine. And so that's one day of my life. But oftentimes my day looks like 4 or 5 appointments and working on projects. So whether I'm writing a book, because I have 11 books I've written so far in the last 9 years.
How many
or
books, Khara?
11, soon to be 12. So I just got asked that earlier this week of which book you're writing next. I'm like, none. I don't have any I'm writing currently. I'm just waiting for these last 2 to launch. Like they take forever. But oftentimes I'm doing a little bit of financial therapy sessions with clients. I also have a money group I do with therapists that I love doing once a week. Supervision, teaching, presenting. These are all hats that I like to wear. And so every day looks slightly different, which I think is how I like it.
What's coming up for me as you say that, I had a session with my supervisor yesterday, and it's like, I'm trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
And we worked with this little part that says you got to do one thing and stick to it, which has never been my MO. Yeah. So I have parts really relating to having lots of things going.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I feel like it's burnout prevention right there. Of like, we're not stuck in any one pattern. We're always growing. I think I don't have neurodivergence, but I have a lot of clients with neurodivergence. Therapist clients are like, hey, I have ADHD. I have this thing going on. And for them, it almost feels like they can exhale. Like, oh, look, I can still be quote unquote successful and do lots of things because that message is so loud in all of our heads. Do one thing and do it for 20 years. Do it for 40 years. I'm part of a generation that's like about to hit 20 years of doing something. And we're all like, there's no pension after 20 years for our generation. There's nothing about retirement in 20 years. We're going to work for 40. So it's like, oh, how interesting. I think this is the existential crisis that's about to happen for all the 40-year-olds because we're like, cool, we've done the thing, but we're not done yet.
I hadn't even considered that wasn't just one of my parts. I heard that from my father.
Sure.
You got to pick something here.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even thought that was a societal money script.
I suspect it is. I've just started articulating this. I'm happy to like spitball this with you, Rick, and see what your thoughts are. But this is what I'm coming into 2026 thinking about is like, wait, we hit a 20-year career, which used to mean something and still means something on some level, but not the level of my career is winding down. It's being maintained longer than other people. Yeah.
I've just sold a controlling interest in my financial planning firm. And so allegedly time is going to open up. And it's more of the encore career rather than I'm not going to do golf and rockers very well. Yeah. There's too many energizing things to do. So, Khara, we are out of time.
So much to say. Yes.
Oh, I'd love to have you back and jump into one of your books. You wrote a book on your Enneagram and money, and I'd love to explore that to you
with you at some point in time. How can people find you? How can they reach out to you?
Let's see. My website has all of my entrepreneurial projects. So for some people that's overwhelming, but everything from clinical supervision to financial therapy of therapists to all 11 books so far in there. So that's crosswaitecounselingplc.com. I'm on Instagram as Khara Croswaite. But yeah, I'm happy to stay connected to people. A lot of joy comes from just talking to your students and other people who are like, what the heck is financial therapy? So I have that conversation quite a bit just to see if it's a fit for people, if it is the missing piece to their career or the next, next iteration of their career. So happy to be a resource and build our community.
Nice. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. It's been invigorating.
Thank you, Rick.
Take care.
Thanks for joining me, Rick Kaler, for another episode of Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. This is where I combine the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Remember, every financial behavior, whether it appears illogical to you or others, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs, feelings, and thoughts. Sign up for my weekly blog at financialawakenings.com. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode.